Well, that was long, huh?
Doing your mom. Doing your mom?
Okay, you already read the title, and yeah, today we're going to be talking about the Bible. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the nations/people/lands that are mentioned in the Bible. And yeah, in this video series, we're going to be talking about said peoples and lands in accordance with this iceberg I made, that arranges them from the most well-known all the way to the most obscure and mostly esoteric places that are mentioned in the Bible. Okay, just a little bit of context before I start this, but this iceberg is kinda, let's say, iffy in terms of how it's created, as I thought that I could include factors such as how much they impacted the storytelling of the Bible, how much they mentioned the Bible, and so on and so forth. But yeah, this is basically how the iceberg looks like at the current moment, but yeah, as always, I will always appreciate any extra additions and some slight tweaks to the iceberg, as it was not really comprehensive enough when I was making it, and yeah, I'm just that kind of guy who likes his work to be neat and concise and stuff like that. And yeah, and also, before anyone goes on to think this is going to be a religious video, it's not going to be a religious video, let me just be honest. I'm going to be approaching this in a historian anthropological perspective in a way, as I'm going to be discussing them in regards on how they played a part in the Bible, its storytelling, and as well as discussing some stuff that might be interesting about such peoples in whatever I can find on the internet, and just really wherever I can find some of the sources on such peoples and stuff like that. And yeah, during the course of this, I will also be explaining the tiers, and yeah, without further ado, I guess we can start the video. And as always, if you enjoyed, then do the necessary. Like and subscribe, and yeah, that's pretty much it. But anyways, let's enter into tier 1. Okay, tier 1. In tier 1, we're just going to be basically talk about the basic peoples we know when we're talking about the Bible, such as the Philistines, the Egyptians, and as always, the people who have been mentioned over 2,400 times in the Bible, and our first entry into this iceberg, the Israelites. Okay, the Israelites. The Israelites, or the people of Israel, were a Semitic group of people who lived in the Lower Levant, aka this part of the Middle East. And yeah, according to the Bible, it says that the Israelites were descendants of Abraham, who, as many people may know, was nicknamed the father of nations, as his sons Ishmael and Isaac would then lead to the formation of the coming civilizations that are going to be mentioned in this iceberg. And yeah, for the Israelites' case, the story goes like this. From Abraham, he had his son Isaac, from his son Isaac, it was his son Jacob, and from Jacob, after having 12 sons, these 12 sons would then lead to the formation of the 12 tribes of Israel. And yeah, the weird thing about Joseph, who is among the 12 sons of Jacob, is that from him, he was not really made into a distinct tribe, but his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, became the last recognized tribes of the Israelites. And yeah, this is mostly because of the fact that Joseph was Jacob's favorite son, and with that, he basically gave Joseph a double portion of his inheritance. And with that double portion of inheritance, he split it equally to his sons Ephraim and Manasseh to share amongst themselves. And yeah, together with other things such as the fact that Jacob basically adopted his own grandsons as his own sons, which I really don't know, but it is what it is, as well as some symbolism behind Joseph with him basically literally saving his entire family from starvation, and as well as some territorial reasons because they were destined to own the entirety of Canaan. Joseph was instead represented by his own 2 sons in the tribal system that made up the Israelites. And yeah, after the events of Exodus, as well as the conquest of the land of Canaan, they would later form the Kingdom of Israel. And yeah, the Israelites during the course of history would basically be treated like a ragdoll of some sort, as they would basically be pushed and pulled around by the next people groups who would either arise from the east, west, north, or even south. And this is very evident in many historical texts rather than the Bible and even the Tanakh. And yeah, the conquerors of the Levant, most of the BC era, were able to record the Israelites in many of the records. And from the records, they would basically summarize them as this. By the way, I'm taking all these texts in summary, so yeah, it might have some issues in there, but hey, I will leave my sources in the description, so feel free if you want to correct me on this. And yeah, that is just a small disclaimer before I do anything wrong. So yeah, let's just continue with the video. And yeah, the Israelites were, as I list them down, number 1, monotheistic, number 2, agriculturists, number 3, warrior-like, number 4, rebellious and stubborn, number 5, resilient and enduring, and finally, culturally distinctive. And yeah, the Israelites would later fall during the times of the Jewish revolts, and these revolts would consequentially lead them to get expelled by the Romans from Judea, and thus quite effectively ending the ancient Israelites and the nation of Israel. That would not exist until the next 2 millenniums as the current day nation of Israel that currently stays in the Middle East.
A great success!
The Jews. The Jews are an ethno-religious group that originated from the Levant, and specifically the lands of Israel and Judah. Wait, aren't the Jews the same as the Israelites? That is a good question, random viewer, and the answer is... it's complicated. Okay, so this is basically the summary of the entire explanations. Alright, so the term Israelite is used when referring to the ancient peoples themselves, while the term Jew is used to describe the peoples who lived in the Southern Kingdom. Again, we're still talking about Israel, that would inevitably over time grow on to form the cultural and spiritual basis of the modern Jewish people, the religion, and etc. and stuff like that. So basically, in pictorial terms, it's like this. Or if you feel like it, you can just look at this ChatGPT summary on it. So yeah, that's basically it, and yeah, you can just stop the video at this current moment and just look at it if you want. Hey, just because I like brevity doesn't mean I should leave some people in the dust. Okay, so this is what happened to the Jews. Okay, the Israelites broke up, they formed the Northern Kingdom of Israel and the Southern Kingdom of Judah. And yeah, after that, the Assyrians came in. The Northern Kingdom rebelled, the Assyrians deported them, and the Southern Kingdom survives. And yeah, they continue to chill while still being exchanged between empires. And yeah, the Romans come in,
Create, explore, expand, concord.
they rebel, the rebellion is squashed, and leads to the mass deportation of Jews out of Judea. And yeah, 2 millennia later, the Jews, who are everywhere in the world, want to go back to their original homeland. And yeah, yada yada yada, you get the whole drill, and here we are today. So basically, the term Israelites died in the past, and the term Jew is used to refer to the current peoples who are culturally, religiously, and ethnically linked to the whole land of Judah and the religion of Judaism. And yeah, with the Jews, specifically after the Roman departure, it was really much of them being bounced around in areas where they were welcomed. And yeah, with the Jews, specifically after the Roman departure, it was really much of them being bounced around in areas where they were welcomed. And hence, during the course of history, it explains why there were a lot of Jews in Europe in the 20th century and in other parts of the world such as Africa, the Middle East, Southern Asia, and the Americas. And yeah, that's basically Jews, and yeah, why not we just ask one of them about the next entry into our list.
What the fuck is this long ass, long jawbreaker looking ass nigga named Miss Mary? Shut up!
The Romans. The Romans. Of course, they would meet their Israelites, and this is evident because of, well, Mare Nostrum. Okay, so where do we start? Alright, so the conquest of the Levant. So back in 63 BC, Pompey the Great of Rome was after the regions that made up Judea. And after the Romans sacked Jerusalem, they would later put in place Judea as a client kingdom that would be under the control of the Romans, which is basically like a form of colonialism, but hey, that's how empire rolls, so yeah, that was basically the gist of it, so yeah. And yeah, the people who would inevitably rule Judea would be none other than the Herodian family. And yes, the same Herod in the Bible who wanted to kill baby Jesus and ordered the mass death of children in the town of Bethlehem. And yeah, after the death of Herod the Great, who by the way died of an infected penis, he was replaced by Pontius Pilate, who would become the direct head of the Roman province of Judea and thus solidifying Rome's control over the province of Judea. And yeah, during the course of the time when the Jews were under the Romans, they were kinda chill with them, but at the same time kinda hating the Romans with all their antics and roles. And yeah, such problems that they would have with the Romans included number 1, taxes, number 2, religious differences, and number 3, just the Romans being total corrupt bastards whenever they interacted with the Jews. And yeah, these problems would then lead to the Jewish revolts that aimed to finally get rid of the Romans out of Judea and finally leaving the Jews to their own land, state, and roles. So yeah, you might be asking, how did it pan out? Well, it was not really good, let me just be honest. The first Jewish revolt, it ended with the destruction of the Second Temple and the collapse of the Jewish elite. The Second Jewish Rebellion. It ended with the increase of Rome's military presence in Judea, as well as tougher measures to discipline the Jews by Rome. And finally, the Bar Kokhba revolt, which is named after Simon Bar Kokhba, and I really don't want to go into that so much, so yeah. Basically, it's a revolt which finally led to the full banishment of Jews out of Jerusalem and Judea and renaming Judea into Syria Palestina. Hence, the name Palestine. And yeah, as you can see, it was not really much of a big win when it came to the Jews, as the events of the Jewish rebellions would later lead them to get spread across the Roman Empire, and thus influence the culture and religion of Jewish people both in the Roman Empire and as well as the Jews who still lived in the lands that were formerly known as the land of Judea. And yeah, that is basically what the Romans were up to in the lands of the Levant, and as well as the fact that I forgot that, they would basically crucify Jesus, suppress the rise of Christianity, and killing about 10 of the disciples of Jesus. And yeah, you can see the Romans were pretty influential with the whole events that made up the New Testaments and the later religious practices of the Jews, and the rise of Christianity because, well, it was bound to happen, let me just be honest. And yeah, okay, I might be wrong in that, so put that in the comments. But yeah, basically that would all solidify Christianity as a major world religion. And yeah, but hey, that is not the only place that was influenced by the Romans, as the next entry to our list is a place that was regarded as the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. Yep, we're talking about Egypt, one of the first places where human civilization spawned, and probably the first pharaohs.
The fuck is that?
Egypt, of course, would be mentioned a number of times in the Bible. As one, look at this, and also the other main villains in the book of Exodus. And yeah, just in case you didn't know about the entire story of Exodus, it basically goes like this. Okay, the Israelites are slaves in Egypt, and this is because of the fact that the pharaohs who are familiar with Joseph were dead, and thus the new pharaoh, who we are not sure about his exact identity, was not really feeling it when it came to the Israelites, as he thought the Israelites would probably overpopulate the region and overthrow the kingdom of Egypt. So what does he do? Slavery time. He gets them to do public works and just being second-class citizens in Egypt. Then what happens? Moses comes in, who lived with the Egyptians and would later come back after God told him to do so, and after many back and forths with God over his past life and current life. So yeah, he tells the Pharaoh to let the Israelites go, or in other words,
let my people go.
It's not until the 10th one where the Pharaoh decides to concede. And yeah, the Israelites are let off, the Egyptians try to get them back. Moses does some water bending over there in the Red Sea, and they find their way from the Egyptians. And yeah, that is basically the entire story of, well, that's basically the first part of Exodus, but hey, it is what it is. And yeah, but some people might not know that the Egyptians would prove to be good people in the biblical narrative, and help be very good allies when it came to the Israelites as a people and several individuals mentioned in the Bible. As for example, which we all know because I mentioned earlier in the video, it's Joseph, the story of Joseph, where he got a period of redemption after being sold by his brothers. And as well as other examples such as the refuge of Jesus during the whole killing of baby boys in Bethlehem, and the refuge of Jeremiah, who went to Egypt to escape the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem. And also, as well as the fact that King Jeroboam, who is a character in the Bible, who would also hide in Egypt during the times when King Solomon was looking for him to kill him, as his influence threatened his rule back in Israel. Oh, by the way, Abraham tricked his way to the Egyptian pharaoh to get some livestock and slaves, so yeah, that was his first time he actually got like actual wealth by basically being a scammer. I don't even know what I'm even writing. And yeah, just a quick question, do you ever ask yourself when all these events happened? Well, the key events mentioned in the Bible that involve the major stories that make up the Old Testament part of the Bible mostly occur in these periods of Egyptian dynastic history. And also, as a side note, there's a limitation where and when these events actually occurred and whether or not they're actually in line with the pharaohs that I mentioned in the Bible, or at least have been written or have shown up in the Bible. But hey, it's just a side note, so yeah, let's just continue with the video. As we can see here, for example, we can see that indeed the pharaohs of the time of Moses were pretty much unaware of the pharaoh of the time of Joseph, and thus making the two narratives link up with each other, and as well as giving us a plausible time and point out the sheer growth of the Israelites in the land of Egypt. And yeah, just to finish off the Egyptians, here are some pharaohs who are mentioned in the Bible. Well, at least in terms of name, that is. There's Necho II, Hofer had his successor Aprius, Taharka, Shoshank I, and yeah, that's pretty much it. There's some rest that are mostly speculations who are yet to be confirmed, and yeah, here are some honorable mentions. There's Ramses II for the pharaoh who met up with Moses during the events of Exodus, and there's Amenemhat. Yeah, I think that's the correct way. Amenemhat III for the pharaoh who met up with Joseph during the entire events when he was in Egypt. And yeah, that is basically the Egyptians in this iceberg. But hey, that was not the only group of people that the Israelites faced up as enemies, as the next entry into our list are going to be the people that the Israelites met up with after the events of Exodus. And yeah, we're going to be talking about the Canaanites. The Canaanites, the people who live in Canaan. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But okay, seriously, this is the land of Canaan. And yeah, the land of Canaan is a geographical subdivision of the Levant, in which a group of people known as the Canaanites lived. But here's the thing, the Canaanites were not one current group. Instead, they were just a conglomeration of different tribes that spawned in the region during the prehistoric period. Now, you might be asking, why did they not unite? Well, look at this, and look at this. There's one basic rule when it comes to, well, when you're trying to make an empire, civilization, or state, and that is geography, and also climates. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And yeah, that was the one problem, and the problem came in with the geography and climates. And yeah, Canaan at the time was not really abundant when it came to resources, and thus mass majority of the tribes would either just stay around in city-states or just decide to immigrate into Mesopotamia or Egypt when things just became, well, terrible. Like, for example, floods,
I'm gonna go kill myself.
raids, and etc. and etc. And yeah, you might be aware of some of these cities in the Bible, such as Jerusalem by the Jebusites, Jericho, Hebron, and many more. And yeah, here's the story about the Canaanites in the biblical narrative. So basically, Noah after the flood decided to get a little bit tipsy. When his son Ham saw him butt naked and buzzed out, he had a laugh that he decided to share with his brothers. His brothers, on the other hand, didn't see the funny, and thus after his brothers took care of his father, he, Noah, decided to take care of Ham, laughing his ass off. He would inevitably decide to not punish Ham, but instead his son Canaan, in which his descendants would be servants to his brother's son's descendants. Does that make any sense? Whatever. And yeah, when you compare it to the historical narrative, it is kinda correlating away with it to some extent, as Shem's descendants were largely made up of the ethnic groups that made up the major civilizations of the Middle East, Japheth's descendants being associated with the peoples of the Eastern Mediterranean and Central Asia, and Ham's descendants and his son's descendants, in extension, being associated with the peoples of North Africa, Egypt, and several parts of the Arabian Peninsula. And yeah, from the neighbors' perspective, more so from the Israelites, who by the way, they're going to be a major focal point in this video, they saw them as decadent idolaters. As you can see, the Canaanite pantheon has had some appearances in the Bible such as Baal, Asherah, and famously, and the one who likes kids, in a very bad way, Moloch. And yeah, the Canaanites, at least in the biblical narrative, would later get overshadowed and conquered by the Israelites. And historically, the land of Canaan would basically be exchanged around by different empires like we once saw on their first gangbang. What the hell was that reference? Jesus Christ. The Canaanites on their part would then assimilate into other civilizations, while some went north of the Levant, who would then settle on the coast of modern-day Lebanon, and form the Phoenician civilization. And with that civilization, it would form the Carthaginians that would later pop up in the North African coast. Oh, by the way, the Phoenicians made the precursor version of the Latin alphabet, so yeah, the more you know. But hey, guess what? The Israelites already have the land, so at least they have some relative peace, so yeah, that's a plus. Yo, what's up, fuckers? The Philistines, the Israelites, arch enemy, the trolls of the Hebrews, and funny enough, the descendants of the Sea Peoples. Yep, you had me right, the Philistines are the descendants of the Pelasgites, who are one of the many tribes that comprise the infamous Sea Peoples. And yeah, as you may know, the Philistines were just utter trolls when it came to the Israelites, as the Bible tells it, stretching from the books of Judges all the way to the book of 2 Samuel. And yeah, the Philistines were relatively a small civilization when you compare to their neighbors, as they were neighboring the larger kingdom of Egypt and the kingdom of Israel, which is actually pretty big when it came to the Philistines, unlike what the Bible likes to portray them as. And yeah, just to start this off, you might be asking, who in God's name are the Pelasgites, and who are the Sea Peoples? Well, Divya, the Sea Peoples are these people. The Sea Peoples, the boat-ridden marauders who were one of the many causes of the Bronze Age collapse. Okay, this might be a lot to really dig into, but basically, the Sea Peoples were a bunch of tribes that came from Europe or from Africa, no one really knows where they came from, who just decided to say, you know what, let's do a little bit of trolling, you know? And just decided to break the first international order of the Eastern Mediterranean world. And yeah, one of the many Sea People tribes was known as the Pelasgites. The Pelasgites allegedly The Pelasgites allegedly coming from Crete, that is this island that is currently owned by Greece. And during the whole shenanigans they had with the tribes that were parts of the Sea Peoples, they got defeated by Ramses III of Egypt, and they would later be put on the Egyptian border with the land of Canaan. And yeah, some of the cities that they formed, such as Gaza, Ashkelon, and Ashdod, were previously used as outposts. And these outposts were basically used by the Egyptians to effectively guard their border in case of any attacks that may come from the land of Canaan. And yeah, from these cities, and together with other two cities, they would form the Pentapolis. And over time, the Pelasgites would grow accustomed to the land, and then went on to grow into becoming the Philistine civilization. And yeah, from what I basically said, you can technically say that the Philistines were Greek. And yeah, the records that prove the existence of the Philistines as well as that of the Israelites came from the sacking of Canaan by this emperor over here. But here's the thing about the records, they're kind of flimsy at best, so take them with a grain of salt, as some scholars believe that the Philistines actually beat the Egyptians.
Hi, this is me from the editing desk, and yeah, that part when I said the Philistines beat the Egyptians, yeah, it's actually the Pelasgites, not the Philistines. The Pelasgites later became the Philistines after Egypt allowed the Pelasgites to settle in Canaan after like the entire kerfuffle of Meneptah II. So yeah, basically, yeah, that was a correction on my parts, on this entire part over here. So yeah, let us continue with the video.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
And thus the Egyptians allowed them to occupy the southern coast of the Levant and use them as guard defenses in case of any attacks that may come out from the land out east. And yeah, on that then about the Philistines technically being Greek, it is kinda really much of an observation type of conclusion to be really set in stone, as much of the culture was really looking a lot like the cultures that inhabited the Greek Aegean islands. And this is seen from stuff such as the architecture, the clothing, the eating habits, and many other stuff that historians can possibly find minus their language, which is completely dead and lost in the seas of time. And yeah, from what I can possibly say, that is pretty much the Philistines. They would later get caught up by the neighbors such as the Egyptians and finally the Assyrians that during the course of the decline would experience a number of problems such as bad economics, conquests, and yeah, that would basically be the final nail in the coffin for the Philistines. And together with the fact that the written records would be lost during the course of their decline. And yeah, they would cement themselves as becoming a lost civilization that would only survive because of the neighbors such as the Egyptians and the long-term enemy, the Israelites, who wrote them in the Tanakh and later on the Bible. And yeah, so honestly, I could have segued to the Assyrians, but that's not the current tier of the iceberg at the moment, so yeah, I guess we're going to be talking about the Babylonians. Cue intro! The Babylonians, the pinnacle of degeneracy, the epicenter of decadence, and the one place that the Bible likes to bash over when it comes to the end times, and just the mess of the world at large. And yeah, for the Babylonians, since I'm talking about the Bible, I'm going to be talking about the New Babylonian Empire, instead of the First Babylonian Empire, since due to the fact that whenever the Bible talks about the Babylonians, it's always about the New Babylonians instead of the Old Babylonians. But just before we talk about the New Babylonians, we are going to be talking about the few instances that the Old Babylonians, or at least the region where Babylon is mentioned. Okay, first of all, the Tower of Babel. You know, that tower which people thought of making back during Genesis, that when God saw it, he decided to just make everyone start speaking different languages. And yeah, after some time, due to all the confusion, they dropped the entire din over how freaking hard it was when it came to actually understanding people when they're constructing the entire din. And yeah, that's pretty much of what I can find on early Babylon when it comes to the Bible. And yeah, that is pretty much what I can find. Oh, and also, Abraham was likely Babylonian, so yeah, the more you know. Okay, since all of that is done away with, then yeah, why not we talk about the new Babylonians? The new Babylonians are remembered in the Bible because of the one and only Nebuchadnezzar II, for he was responsible for the practical evisceration of the Jewish state. And yeah, after the sacking and conquest of Judah, he would then exile the Jews out of the lands that they inhabited. And thus, this brings us back to the books of Jeremiah and Lamentations. Now talk about the events that happened before and after the Babylonian conquest. And yeah, how was life for the Israelites during the Babylonian exile? Well, let's just say it was pretty much symbolic in terms of suffering rather than just pure literal suffering. Like for example, the elites, who were the ones who were actually subject to the exile and not the entire population. And then comes their general life. The Israelites in this case could still do whatever they wished to do and just do whatever they wanted, as some still continued with their old economic practices such as farming and trading, as long as they paid their taxes on time. And yeah, the religion on the other hand was not really well off in terms of being kept together, as due to exposure to the Babylonian religion, it would have an effect on the Jewish population to become followers of the gods and the customs, thus threatening the religious hold among the Jews. And yeah, on the other hand, the exile also brought some good in a way, as the concept of synagogues became popular during the times of the Babylonian exile, as a way to still maintain their religious customs, but in a much simpler and miniature way. As well as their temple, well, getting sacked. Again. That's a bad way, by the way. And yeah, to be honest, it's not really like they were all slaves and stuff like that, like what the Bible tries to give the vibe on the entire event. And yeah, it was pretty much no different from what they felt with the Assyrians. And yeah, they were allowed to do this stuff as long as they paid their taxes on time, followed the rules, and pretty much just don't agitate the state in a way that you just want to get your independence. And yeah, the exile would continue until the time the Persians conquered Babylon, which is actually prophesied by the prophet Daniel, who was a part of the elites that were exiled to Babylon. And yeah, from the Persians, I will continue that in the next video, and yeah, that's pretty much the Babylonians, but you already know, the Persians let the Jews go back to Judah because of, well, Cyrus the Great, the freaking goats. And yeah, that is pretty much level 1 of Bible Iceberg, and yeah, this then has, well, taken me a lot when it comes to time. Like, I don't know whether you can hear my voice, but basically right now I'm just like, I'm happy, I'm honestly very happy that I'm done, and it's not like I hate doing this, but basically this thing has taken me a long time to like really do and stuff like that. And hey, at least I have made a video for all of you guys who are watching my channel. And yeah, I'm sorry, not gonna lie, I was kind of preoccupied with a lot. Let me just be honest, I just finished high school, by the way, if you couldn't tell, and that I was taking a break for myself after all the shabacle around school, exams, stuff like that. And yeah, I was kind of lazy. Very sorry, and I'll punch myself in the face for that. But hey, I'm joking. Quite fine with everything. I hope things are going to get better, and hopefully better for this year. As well, not gonna lie, I've had a lot of stuff to do last year with switching schools, exams, and stuff like that. And also with like this year, I've been like trying to apply for ID and doing driver's school. So yeah, this video would have been released like around January, December and stuff like that, but I was completely preoccupied, and yeah, I'm very sorry. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for watching this stuff over here. The one person is watching who I know starts with the letter A, I suppose, or M, or T. I don't know, I really don't know. And yeah, if you liked it, then consider giving me a sub or even a like if you feel so generous. And yeah, I'm planning to make more videos this year, and I hope that things will be the best, because right now I'm kinda racing with time to push as many videos as I can before going to university, and also looking for, well, a course which I can actually balance with this entire YouTube stuff. And yeah, that's my own personal tangents, my own personal stories. So yeah, anyway, and yeah, that's basically what I can say. And yeah, I guess I can say Daddy's back with the milk, and also watch my shorts. And yeah, basically that's it. So have a nice day, have a nice night, have a nice evening, have a nice whatever, and yeah, see you in the next video.